we see in those moments is, I think, the actual authentic, intrinsic human spirit, which is a spirit of togetherness, a spirit of interdependence, a spirit of compassion and generosity and joy. But that gets quickly eroded as we settle back into our day-to-day lives. And there are many reasons why we settle back. And there are forces, I think, in the messaging we see in media and from work and in the larger culture, which keep pulling us back, I think, away from a focus on relationships. Tim, what I find interesting is if you and I went to a street corner in any major city in the United States, and we pulled 100 people aside, and we asked them all what their top priority in life was, I can almost guarantee you that all of them would have a person as their top priority. Maybe their spouse, maybe their child, maybe their mother or father. But if we look at how we live our lives, if you look at where we put our time, energy, and focus, if you look at what society tells us constitutes success, it's actually very different. Like the message that society sends us, and in particular that young people get through various forms of media, is that success is driven by your ability to acquire wealth, power, or reputation/fame. And if that is what worth is connected to, then we'll build our lives around that. That's where we'll spend our time. That's what we'll be thinking about when we go to sleep at night. That's what we'll invest our energy in. But in reality, I think what gives us the deepest joy and fulfillment in our life is actually our relationships. And when I think back on the people that I had the privilege of caring for in the hospital at the end of their life, I think a lot about what they talked about in those final days. And what they talked about were not the promotions that they received or how big their bonuses were. They didn't talk about how many followers they had on Instagram or how many friends they had in the world. What they talked about really were the quality of their relationships. They talked about the people they loved, about the relationships they wish they had spent more time with. They talked about the joy that the people in their life brought them. And I think that is a very powerful signal to us of what really matters. That's not something that I'm seeing. That's something that people in all walks of life who spend time with people in their final days, this is what they focus on. They focus on people. And so I think that if we want to ultimately address the deeper issues we're facing as a society, whether it's the polarization we're dealing with, whether it's the challenges we face on the health front with chronic illness, particularly with mental illness and with addiction, I think we have to ask ourselves, what role does social connection and loneliness play in the outcomes that we're worried about? And what I have found over the last few years in thinking about this issue and talking to people who have studied this for a lifetime, in hearing and listening to the stories of people all across the world who have struggled with loneliness, but who have also built lives of rich social connection, is that it is our relationships that are the foundation on which we build everything else. Good health, fulfillment, and a good life.
How would you suggest, because we've sort of zoomed from the macro into the micro, which is where I would like to stay for a bit, rather than looking at, say, the federal level, let's talk about a company. If you're talking to a CEO or a C-suite or a leader of a large group of people within a company, what are things that they can do to help improve the sense of connectedness or worth as a sort of counterweight to loneliness, which I think that is going to be a challenge for a lot of people, and will increasingly be a challenge for a lot of people, certainly over the next few weeks. And therein lies an opportunity to sharpen the saw as it relates to developing sort of countervailing or counterbalancing forces opposing isolation or loneliness. So what types of tools or advice would you suggest with business leaders, people who run companies, whether it's 5 people or 500 or 5,000?
I'm really glad you asked, Tim, because I think that the workplace is an incredibly powerful place for us to cultivate human connection. And I think when we don't have workplaces where people feel like they have strong relationships, that has a measurable impact on productivity, on retention, and on overall satisfaction at work. There are some fascinating researchers who have been working in this area, including Sigal Barsaid at Wharton, who have found that loneliness in the workplace is just as common as it is in the general population. Somewhere around 20-25% of people in the workplace seem to struggle with loneliness, and the consequences are substantial. So whether you care about the bottom line or you care about the happiness of your employees, loneliness and social connection matter. And I think there are a couple of things that we can do in companies that would really help. I think one is to create opportunities for people to really see and understand each other for who they are beyond the roles that they play in the workplace. All of us have a fundamental desire to want to be seen for who we are, not just as, Tim, who's great at pricing strategy, or Vivek, who's good at, God, I don't know what I'm good at, not sure. But, we want to be known for more than a skill set. We want to be known as human beings who've got a story. I'll tell you one example of something we did when I was a Surgeon General, is we created this exercise called the Inside Scoop exercise. And we did this when, after a year of working really hard to try to create a family environment in the office, we realized that people still were not as connected as they could be, despite all of the weekend picnics and the happy hours and all of that.
Quick question before we get to the practice, the Inside Scoop. How did you ascertain that you had that problem? Does that make sense? Like, how did you diagnose that or observe that before we get to the Inside Scoop? I want to get there, but I want to also know how you diagnosed it, because I would imagine there are plenty of business leaders who think everything is just hunky-dory going along swimmingly, whereas in fact, it is perhaps not. So if you could speak to that.
Yeah. So, what we didn't do is we didn't have like a very specific survey tool that we use to assess in a quantitative way whether people felt connected or not. Those kind of tools actually exist, but we didn't use them. But what we were going on was actually a much more simple observation. From my perspective, I was observing the office and feeling that people were not stepping out of their lanes enough to help each other. Now, that's a voluntary thing. It's not their job description to help someone else with their job. But it wasn't happening to the extent that I thought it should be happening, and I started to wonder why. And to me, when I think about the workplace, a lot of my thinking comes back to the model of the family. So in a family, people help each other. Why do they help each other? Because they feel a sense of commitment and connection to each other, because they know each other deeply. So even if somebody messes up, there's a deeper well of knowledge about who that person is that makes you more likely to forgive them and to give them the benefit of the doubt. In a workplace, I think you can ideally create a similar kind of environment. So the fact, though, that people were not stepping out of their lane enough to help each other made me think that their connection to each other was not as strong as what we wanted it to be. And so this Inside Scoop exercise that we instituted was actually very simple. It was 5 minutes in our weekly all-staff meeting where we picked one individual and we asked them to show us pictures for those 5 minutes. Pictures of anything they wanted, except it couldn't be connected to the work that they were doing right now, to their current job. So some people showed examples of careers they had before. Others showed pictures of their families. People picked what they wanted. What was really powerful about this, despite how simple it was, is it gave people a chance to share who they were without any pressure, in the sense that we weren't telling them to fill some criteria to generate some sort of response, have a list of questions that they could pose to the group. There was none of that. It was just very simple. Show us something that you'd want us to know about your life. I'll tell you the one gentleman in particular, who is my aide de camp and was in the Marine Corps prior to joining the Public Health Service. We all thought that he might show pictures of his time in the Marine Corps. He had a strong allegiance to the Marine Corps. He talked about his experiences there a lot. He was also, very stoic. He still had the same crew cut and haircut that he had in the Marine Corps. He had maintained, over all those years. He was what people in the office called a guy's guy. And when the day came, though, for his exercise, he didn't show pictures of his time in the service. What he showed were pictures of his mother and pictures of his father. And he said that he could see the musical talent of his father living on in his children as they tinkered with the piano. He said with his mother that when he was in those moments of grave danger in the Marine Corps, when he was deployed on missions where he wasn't even sure if he would come back alive, that in those moments when he felt the fear rising in his stomach, that it was his mother that he would think of, because she was his picture of strength. She had raised him and his brother largely on her own. She had fed them and clothed them and got them an education and helped them build a successful life. And that, to him, was real strength. And when he shared that story, Tim, it was so deeply moving. That 5 minutes of sharing built relationships that we had not built over the past year. And within a few weeks, we started to see people stepping out of their lanes and helping each other. We started to see people who had previously been quiet in meetings start to raise their hand and participate because they felt that they were seen and that they were appreciated for who they were. That was a very powerful moment for us. So workplaces that can create opportunities like this, semi-structured opportunities for people to share more about who they are, that is very powerful. There's one other thing, Tim, that I want to mention also, which is that there's great power in people helping each other in the workplace. And one of the stories that I came across when doing research on loneliness was the stories and the research of a gentleman at the University of Michigan, Wayne Baker, at the business school there, who's done a lot of work on relational energy, on understanding what our interactions with other people do to the energy we feel and how that energy translates into productivity in the workplace. And one of the things that he has found is that high quality connections, which can be lasting friendships or momentary interactions, both can be extraordinarily powerful in raising our energy level. And one of the things that really boosts that relational energy is the experience of helping someone else, but also the experience of receiving help from someone else. So what he did is he, along with Adam Grant and a few others, put together a structured sort of tool through a company now that they've built called Give It To Us, which allows organizations to have an organized setting where people can be a part of a community, where they submit a need that they have, and other people can submit answers or offers of help to meet that need. And you can do this online. You can actually do it in person and regular sort of gatherings in groups and companies. But the point is that the experience of being able to identify people's needs and then have people step up to meet those needs in a structured way can be extraordinarily powerful and can significantly boost relational energy. But the final thing, Tim, which is hard to put into a specific protocol, has to do with culture in the workplace. And creating a culture of kindness and compassion is extraordinarily important if you want to build human connection in the workplace and have people build strong connections with each other. And that is not something you can just put on your mission statement or your value statement, stamp it on the wall, and just hope it happens. That's a place where leadership by example really matters. People, despite all the cynicism that we have in the world, people still do look to their leaders for examples. And when the leaders in organizations treat each other with kindness, when they look to people throughout the organization, give them time and actually listen to their concerns honestly and empathically, that makes a difference. People take note of that. And so I think these are some areas, that can be extraordinarily powerful in the workplace in terms of how we build connection, creating opportunities for people to see each other for who they are, creating opportunities for people to give and receive help, and helping to build that culture of kindness and compassion through example and through practice. These, I think, are the key ingredients to building a connected workplace.
I love the inside scoop exercise, and I have a question about the specifics in one respect, because I want to try this, and I will try this with my employees. I am lucky in the sense, well, at least in one sense, that I have a very small team. How many staff members did you have in these all-hands meetings?
So these meetings were meetings of our immediate office, so there were about 20 people.
How did you pick the people who would go, or how were they chosen?
The goal was to go through everyone in the office, but we started with the people